The judge looked at me like he already knew the verdict. My mother was crying behind me. My father wouldn't even look at my face. And that's when I realized something that chilled my blood more than the prison sentence itself. They weren't crying because they were losing their son. They were crying because they got what they wanted. I was innocent, but that didn't matter anymore. I grew up believing my parents were strict, but fair. They weren't abusive. They weren't cruel. They were just distant. Love in our house came with conditions. Be obedient. Don't ask questions. Don't embarrass the family. My younger sister, Lily, was their pride. Straight A's, perfect manners, golden child. Me? I was the problem. Not because I did bad things, but because I asked why. Why can't I choose my own career? Why does Lily get special treatment? Why does Dad look at me like I'm already guilty? I didn't know it then, but my parents had already decided my role in their story. I was 22 when the police knocked on our door. It was 6:13 a.m. I remember the time because my mother screamed before the knock finished echoing. They accused me of armed robbery and assault at a local warehouse. I laughed. I actually laughed. I told them they had the wrong person. That's when my father said something that still haunts me. Just tell them the truth. This will go easier if you cooperate. I stared at him. What truth? I asked. He didn't answer. The interrogation room smelled like old coffee and fear. The detective slid photos across the table. A masked man. A crowbar. A body on the floor. I wasn't there, I said calmly. They nodded. Then my lawyer entered. A lawyer my parents hired. He leaned close and whispered, "Your parents already gave statements." My chest tightened. What statements? He swallowed. They placed you at the scene. The room started spinning. My own parents had told police I left the house that night, that I came back nervous, that I had unexplained money. None of it was true. Every lie was precise, practiced, rehearsed, like they'd been waiting years to say it. 3 days later, I learned the reason. The robbery was actually connected to my father's business partner. Someone needed a fall guy, someone expendable, someone with a history of attitude problems. Me. If I took the blame, the family business survived. Lily's college fund stayed intact. My parents' reputation stayed clean. I was the cost of peace. Court wasn't about justice. It was theater. The prosecutor painted me as angry, resentful, violent. Then my mother took the stand. She cried, real tears, and said, "I don't recognize my son anymore." That sentence sealed my fate. The jury avoided my eyes. The judge didn't hesitate. 25 years. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I just turned around and saw my father finally meet my eyes. For half a second, I thought he felt regret. Then he looked away. Prison doesn't break you all at once. Peels you slowly. Every day, you learn who predators are. You learn silence is safety. You learn trust is a luxury. I stopped writing letters. They never answered anyway. Years passed, aged, but anger stayed fresh. Until one day, a man was transferred into my block. And when he saw my name, his face went pale. He whispered, "You're not supposed to be here." I stood up slowly. "What do you mean?" He swallowed hard. "Because your father already confessed." The man's name was Raymond Cole, late 50s, graying beard, eyes that never stopped scanning the room. He didn't look like someone afraid of prison. He looked like someone afraid of what prison remembered. That night, he sat across from me in the common area, lowering his voice. "You're Daniel Harris," he said. I nodded slowly. He leaned closer. "I was inside when your father paid to keep that confession quiet." My heart slammed against my ribs. "What confession?" I asked. Raymond looked around, then said the words that shattered my reality. "Your father admitted everything 12 years ago. Raymond used to work for my father's business partner. The same partner connected to the warehouse robbery. The same man who disappeared shortly after my conviction. Raymond explained it in pieces because even speaking it felt dangerous. My father had gone to the police privately. He confessed that the robbery was planned. I wasn't involved. I was used to protect the business. But here's the twist. The confession never became public. Why? Because my father didn't go to clear my name. He went to negotiate. He offered money, silence, political favors, and the police accepted. The confession was sealed, buried, erased from official records, and I stayed in prison. I asked Raymond the question that had been burning inside me for over a decade. Why didn't he save me after that? Raymond didn't answer right away. Then he said, because letting you out would expose everything. If I was released, the business would collapse. The partner would be arrested. My parents would be publicly destroyed. And worst of all, they'd have to admit they chose money over their son. So they chose silence instead. That night I didn't sleep. Not because I was scared. Because something inside me clicked into place. Innocence was gone. Hope was gone. All that remained was clarity. I stopped being emotional. I started being strategic. I worked. I studied. I listened. I learned law books, appeals processes, how systems protect themselves. Prison taught me patience. And patience taught me power. Raymond had kept something. A mistake my father made. A recording. A hidden audio file from years ago. Captured accidentally during one of the negotiations. It wasn't a full confession. But it was enough. My father's voice saying, my son doesn't need to know. Just make sure this never comes back on us. I felt sick. Not because of the crime, but because of how calmly he said it. When I filed my appeal, everything slowed down. Documents vanished. Deadlines were missed. Witnesses suddenly forgot. The system didn't want to reopen my case. Because reopening it meant admitting they helped bury the truth. But this time, I wasn't alone. Raymond contacted an investigative journalist. A woman who hated corrupt families more than criminals. Her name was Elena Moore, and she believed me. The headline didn't mention my parents' names at first. It said, inmate claims family sacrificed him to protect million-dollar business. People laughed. Until Elena released the audio clip. Then everything exploded. TV shows, social media, public outrage. And for the first time in 15 years, my parents spoke publicly. My mother appeared on television. Older, thinner, fragile. She said, we did what we thought was best for the family. That sentence ended her. Because the public heard what she didn't say. She never said, he's innocent. We were wrong. We're sorry. She just defended the decision. The comments were brutal. My father denied everything. He called the audio fake. He blamed political enemies. But Elena had more. Financial records, secret payouts, witness statements. The walls were closing in. And that's when my father made his final mistake. He tried to visit me. I hadn't seen him since sentencing day. When he walked into the visiting room, he looked small, weak, mortal. He sat down. I didn't speak. Finally, he whispered, if you help me fix this, I'll get you out. I smiled, for the first time in years, and said, I don't want out that way. He frowned. What do you mean? I leaned forward. I want the truth. Exactly the way you buried it. He froze, because he knew something I didn't yet. Something that could destroy everyone involved. He whispered, if that comes out, your mother won't survive it. I leaned back calmly and said, neither did I. My father thought he still had leverage. Money, connections, fear. That's how he'd controlled everything for decades. What he didn't understand was this. The truth doesn't need power when it has momentum. 2 weeks after his prison visit, Elena released the full investigation. This time, there were no edits, no blurring of names, no protection. My father's name, my mother's name, the business partner, the police officials, all of it, public,
permanent,
unstoppable. The story exploded overnight. People didn't just feel angry, they felt betrayed. Because my parents weren't monsters on the surface. They were donors, church members, community leaders, the kind of people who talked about family values. And now the world saw the truth. They had traded their own son's freedom for comfort. Protests formed outside their offices. Sponsors pulled out. The company's stock collapsed in 48 hours. And then the subpoenas came. My mother couldn't handle the pressure. She was used to controlling narratives quietly. This was different. Neighbors stopped greeting her. Friends disappeared. Church doors closed. One night she called Elena. She didn't ask for forgiveness. She asked for protection. Elena recorded the call. And my mother said the words she never said to me. I knew he was innocent. That was it. That was the sentence that destroyed her. My case was reopened. Not quietly, publicly, televised. The same courtroom, the same judge. But this time the audience was watching. The prosecution tried to stall, tried to delay, tried to reduce the damage. But Elena had done her job too well. Evidence stacked like a mountain. When my mother was called to testify again, she didn't cry. She didn't perform. She confessed. Her voice shook. She said, "We told ourselves we were protecting the family." Then she looked at me, really looked at me, and whispered, "We convinced ourselves you'd survive." That hurt more than prison ever did, because it meant they knew what they were doing, and did it anyway. The judge stood silently for a long time. Then he said, "This court failed you." My conviction was vacated. My sentence erased. 15 years. Gone on paper. But not in my body. Not in my mind. When they removed my cuffs, people clapped. I didn't, because freedom felt unfamiliar. Heavy. The prison doors opened. Cameras everywhere. Microphones shoved in my face. People wanted anger, tears, revenge. I gave them none. I just said, the truth didn't free me. It exposed them. And walked away. My father was arrested 3 days later. Fraud, bribery, obstruction of justice. But even then, he didn't confess publicly. He released a statement blaming pressure, fear, a mistake made to protect loved ones. He still didn't say my name. That's when I realized something important. I didn't need his apology. I needed his downfall. During sentencing, my father finally asked to speak. He looked older than prison. He said, "I thought sacrificing one would save many." The courtroom was silent. Then the judge replied, "You didn't sacrifice one. You destroyed yourself. 22 years. No special treatment. No early release." I watched without expression, because by then, I felt nothing for him. As they led my father away, he turned back. And for the first time in his life, he looked afraid. Not of prison, but of me, because he realized something too late. I hadn't taken revenge yet. People expected revenge to look loud. Courtroom speeches, public humiliation, angry interviews. That's not how I did it. Because prison taught me something important. The deepest pain comes from clarity, not cruelty. I didn't want my parents to suffer. I wanted them to understand. After my release, I rented a small apartment. No luxury, no attention, and I started writing letters. Not to send, to document. Every lie, every date, every choice they made. I wrote what prison smells like, what solitary feels like, how birthdays disappear, how hope erodes. Then I compiled it all into a memoir. I didn't name it after them. I named it after me. The book didn't accuse. It didn't insult. It simply told the truth. Page by page. It became required reading in law schools, éthique course, wrongful conviction seminars. People didn't see my parents as villains. They saw them as cowards. And that was worse, because villains are feared. Cowards are remembered. My mother never spoke publicly again. No interviews. No apologies. No defense. She moved into a small house far from the city. People say she kept the book on her nightstand. Never opened it. Never threw it away. She passed 2 years later. Quietly. No scandal. No forgiveness. And when I was asked if I would attend the funeral, I declined. Not out of hate, but because closure doesn't require presence. My father wrote to me from prison. A single page. Shaky handwriting. He asked for forgiveness. Not because he understood, but because he was afraid to die unforgiven. I never replied, because forgiveness is not a transaction. And silence was the only answer he earned. Freedom wasn't walking out of prison. Freedom was waking up without rage, without obsession, without their shadows living in my head. I built a life that didn't include them, friends who chose me, work that mattered, a name that stood alone. Years later, I was invited to speak at a conference. Wrongful convictions, family betrayal, systemic silence. At the end, someone asked, "Do you still think about them?" I paused, then said, "Only when people ask how I survived." The room went quiet, because that was the truth. They sent me to prison to save themselves. In the end, the truth didn't just set me free. It revealed who was really guilty. And I walked away, with my name, my life, and my story finally mine.